Hello and welcome to the MEG Method Podcast, the podcast that helps you move, think and feel better for life. I recently traveled to Japan for the first time and participated in the Tokyo Marathon, and I have had lots of requests since to do an episode all around that. So this is what this episode is. I have three hopes for this episode. One, if you are planning to run the Tokyo Marathon in the near future, I hope this episode can help make navigating your own experience a little easier. Please also listen to episodes 138 and 150 of the MEG Method podcast for a deeper dive into the Tokyo Marathon and the logistics around it. Number two, even if you are not a runner but would love to travel to Japan one day, then I hope this honest recap can get you excited for your own trip to Japan and also give you some tips that I would have loved to know before I travel. And number three, if you have previously ran the Tokyo Marathon or been to Japan, I hope this episode can bring a sense of nostalgia to you, bring a smile on your face if you are missing Japan just as much as I am. It's also important to add that I am not sponsored or paid for anything that I mention in this podcast. I'm purely sharing my own experience for what I did, and I'll recommend anything that I found useful in the hopes that it might be useful to you as well. My big tip to start with is to book as early as you can for things like plane tickets and accommodation. So as soon as you know you've got a place for the Tokyo Marathon or the dates you want to visit Japan, then book as early as you can. My flight was definitely the most expensive flight I've paid for out of the marathon majors. And then with the accommodation, as you can expect, anywhere that's hosting a marathon, lots of people are going to be flocking to that area. So the prices of accommodation is going to go up, and also they're going to be harder to find. So book as early as you can. Now, I'd never been to Japan before, but I'd had lots of amazing feedback and recommendations from friends that had been over the years. So it's been on my bucket list for a while, but I had a few things ahead of it and life's. So it's been one of those things that I'd said I'd do, but it's just run away from me. However, I was extremely lucky and I got a place in the Tokyo Marathon in the ballot first time. So when my name got pulled, I was like, it's fate. I can't let this opportunity pass me by. I'm very fortunate. And so, used that as an excuse to go. My mum came with me as well. She came out to support me. We used it as a trip together, and we decided to go for 14 nights in total. We did 6 days in Tokyo, 4 days in Osaka, but that included 1 day trip to Nara. And then on another day, we tripped to Hiroshima and Miyajima. We spent 3 days in Kyoto and one final evening in Tokyo. Thankfully, because Tokyo is 8 hours ahead of the UK, when we arrived in Japan, we still had most the day ahead of us, despite that being a travel day. If you are running the Tokyo Marathon, I would suggest getting to Tokyo a good few days beforehand, depending on where you're coming from, just to try and get ahead of the jet lag so you're not going into the race feeling that jet lag and super tired. I got recommended from some friends to use the Time Shifter app, which is an app that gives recommendations on how to better avoid jet lag, depending on the time zone you're going to and from. Because I'd never used the app before, I also got my first trip for free, and that was actually really helpful, the tips it gave me. So I think I still felt kind of that tiredness fog that you get with jet lag for the first couple of days. But I managed, thanks to the app, I managed to get into a good sleep routine pretty early on. And I definitely think jet lag was a lot easier for me this time around. So that's something I tried and was very helpful. Tokyo has two major airports. You've got Haneda and Narita. I flew into Haneda Airport with Japan Airlines. There was actually some cheaper flight options out there. However, I chose Japan Airlines because it had been highly recommended to me. And also they have a great track record for being on time and also not cancelling flights, which when I was going there for the marathon, first of all, I had to be there by a certain date to make sure I got my bib and that I could run. But also, like anyone, if you're spending a lot of money and going a long way, I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss any days of my trip. So that's why I went for them, and they did not disappoint. It was extremely punctual. The staff were incredible. They were really attentive without being like in your face all the time. We just had basic economy seats, but they were very spacious, especially compared to some other airlines that I've flown with. It was very easy to pre-order my vegetarian meal, and it was actually the best economy vegetarian flight meal I've ever had. And it was so clean as well, to the point that a woman next to me on the aisle accidentally dropped some of her food into the aisle. The staff were there, like out of nowhere, to clean it up. They'd already sorted her out some new food. And then a few moments later, a stewardess appeared with a silent hoover and just hoovered it all up. I have never ever seen that before on a flight. It's just this silent hoover, and a few moments later, you would never have known anything happened. So I was quite impressed. If you've travelled for a major marathon before, you'll hopefully have got to experience that amazing buzz amongst other runners when you're traveling. I had a few lovely conversations with other runners, including a woman who was a 6-star finisher. And this 6-star she was trying to get for the last 3 years, but it'd been postponed due to COVID. So it's so nice to get to celebrate her and the achievement she was hopefully going to have that weekend. And that buzz just continued around the city for the rest of the trip. Landing, it was very quick, a nice and smooth flight, no problems there. It was very quick through immigration. There was really helpful staff. I do think one of the main reasons that immigration was so quick was we used Visit Japan Web Digital Services website, which is a free service that lets you fill out your immigration forms before landing. So you can sort out your custom immigrations form. And that means that when we got to the other end, it was already done and we didn't have to join another long queue. So I do think that was a big part into why that was so quick. I've put the link for that in the show notes. As a marathon runner, I also traveled with a small bag of protein powder and porridge oats for my breakfast on race day. And I just brought a carry-on luggage, a small suitcase, and I put it in there and I had no problems either end. The airport was fairly easy to navigate. However, I would still have a plan for when you arrive. You're going to get there. You're kind of flustered because you're in a new country, especially a country where a lot of the signs are in Japanese at the airport. That's a bit more helpful with more stuff in English, but you're also tired. So try and have a plan beforehand. There are taxis available, but they are the most expensive option. I would recommend having a translate app on your phone so that you can type messages in English and translate that for your taxi driver. I'd also recommend saving a screenshot of the name of your hotels in Japanese so you can show that to your driver as well, just to make sure that you get to the right place. The limo bus is also another option. That's the most popular option that I've seen. You can pre-book, I think, that even before you get to Japan. It's quite a good option if you're taking big luggage with you, and that will take you to the central areas of Tokyo. But just be aware, you obviously then need to navigate from there to the rest of the way to your hotel. Mum and I actually decided to take the train option as we wanted to work out the trains early on, so it was easier for the rest of our trip. So we went over to the information desk, got our tickets and went from there. You can use services to send luggage ahead to the next hotel, even if you are going to different cities as well. We didn't personally use this. We just used our travel carry-on cases, which we managed to pack fairly lightly for 14 days. It definitely was a squeeze on the way back after we bought gifts for people, but that works for us. So didn't use the sending luggage option ourselves, but we do know this is a popular option. So just do a little search into information on that. If that sounds good to you, it might just help you better navigate without having to drag big suitcases along. In terms of travel money, I was advised to bring around 10,000 yen per day. And that was actually a great recommendation that worked for us. I actually spent a little less than that most days. I wasn't eating out every meal. We'd usually have something for dinner. We'd go to a restaurant for dinner. And then during the day, we either had the hotel breakfast, which usually is buffet style. So we were quite full and therefore didn't need lunch, or we would just have sort of convenience foods, trying out some different Japanese foods throughout the day. But even that, you would have had enough for a lot of places on a 10,000 yen budget. And in addition to that, a lot of the tourist attractions were very reasonably priced. I'd say cash is still king in Japan. However, digital is gaining popularity, especially in a lot of younger places. I'd say I paid about 80% in cash. And this was especially helpful in places like Kyoto, where I found there wasn't as many card options, and 20% digital, which was most helpful when I was using things like transport and convenience stores. It's worth looking into buying an integrated circuit card for Japan, or an IC card as they call it. There are 3 different types of card in Japan, different IC cards. You've got Suica, Pasmo, or ICOCA card. We got a digital Suica card, as this is arguably the most popular method of paying in Japan. These IC cards can be used to pay for train travel. You can also use them on vending machines, convenience stores, and actually a lot of restaurants use them now. There's usually a sign at the till of what payments are allowed. And I did see the Suica sign at a lot of places. They used to have physical Suica cards that you could purchase, but they are harder to find nowadays. I think there has been a shortage. And actually, it was just much more convenient for me to have it on the phone. So to add the Suica card to an iPhone, to your Apple Wallet, for the iPhone, you would open the wallet app and then you tap the add button. For your Apple Watch, you go on your iPhone, you open the Apple Watch app, and then you tap the My Watch tab. Then you scroll down, you tap Wallet and Apple Pay, and then you tap Add Card. For both options, you then tap Travel Card. You can choose the card you want. You can use the search feature and type in Suica. You then want to tap Continue, and then you choose an amount to put on the card. Now, the smallest amount I could put on the card was 1,000 yen. So I did that to start with, and that worked out about £5. And then I tapped Add. You then follow the steps on the screen to confirm your purchase and add your card. If you then add the card as your express card, you also then don't have to authenticate it every time you swipe in at the station. For inner city travel, there are 3 major railway companies in Tokyo that are the most convenient for moving around the central areas. They are operated by JR East and the subway line companies TUI and Tokyo Metro. As a non-resident, you can buy a 24-hour, a 48-hour, and a 72-hour subway ticket at a small number of stations. But it's important to note that these only work on TUI or Tokyo Metro subway lines. So they won't work on the JR lines, just like a JR pass wouldn't cover travel on subway lines, only JR. For the first few days, my mum and I just bought a single subway and JR line tickets, or we used our prepaid Suica cards on the phone, as we'd planned to do our sightseeing as in a way that made geographical sense, and therefore got to use the subway less. So, for example, we planned to go to Sensoji and the Skytree on the same day because they were close together and they were easily walkable. For the first few days of our Tokyo visit, we went to one of those designated stations that sell the tickets. We had to bring our passports with us for ID to prove we were not a resident. And then we bought a 72-hour subway ticket for the rest of the Tokyo leg of the trip. I'd massively recommend at least getting a 24-hour ticket for anyone who is supporting a marathon runner on marathon day, because this saved my mum a lot of money because she was going here, there and everywhere around the city on the subway lines to come see me. So I definitely recommend a 24-hour ticket for anyone supporting. If you are a marathon runner, you don't have to worry about this because you will get a free 24-hour pass in your race pack that will be given to you at the Expo. If you are traveling outside of Tokyo and visiting other cities, then you may well be considering getting a Shinkansen, which is Japan's bullet train. And I would highly recommend making at least one journey on them if you can, because it really is an amazing experience. Even just seeing them come into the station is really cool. And it's another thing entirely to get to ride them. And unlike the UK, Japan's public transport is impeccably on time. So that's something to experience in itself. A big sightseeing tip is if you are traveling on the Shinkansen, if you're traveling to Osaka or Kyoto and you want to see Mount Fuji, then choose the side that has seats D and E when booking on the ordinary cards, and seats C and D on the green cars, as these are on the Mount Fuji side, regardless of the train's direction. So hopefully that tip can help you get some great Mount Fuji pictures from the train. The day we were first traveling on the Shinkansen, it was Medal Monday, so you can absolutely bet I was taking the opportunity to have some Mount Fuji pictures with my medal. I would say take some time working out your transport travel plans before you fly to Japan, as you may save yourself a lot of money, time, and energy. So, for example, a lot of people recommended that we get a JR pass for our travels. The JR pass allows you unlimited travel on all JR train lines and Shinkansen operated by JR. But when we did some research into this, it was actually cheaper for us to buy our tickets to each place individually. So that's what we did in the end. Unfortunately, the price of the JR pass has gone up a lot in recent years. So it was a great recommendation a few years ago and it was a lot cheaper, but now it's currently 50,000 yen for a standard 7-day pass and 80,000 yen for a standard 14-day pass. This didn't work for us personally because the 7-day pass was 1 day too short. And the last day we had left was our most expensive train ride that we'd have to pay on top. And the 14-day pass was just too long and therefore not worthwhile. So have a little look into what is the best option for you. You can get some regional smaller JR passes that cover a couple of cities on a certain line. So that might work better for you. There's also some great websites that you can use that will help calculate your journey. If you put your itinerary in, it will give you the best price travel option for you and let you know whether it's worthwhile. Just please be aware that if you do buy the main JR pass, you need to buy this before leaving for Japan, as it has to be bought by non-residents, so you can't buy that when you're there. This can also take a number of days to process, so give yourself plenty of time for it to arrive before your flight. And the pass, just like the railway tickets, it activates from the first time you use it. We bought our individual Shinkansen tickets whilst in Japan using the website SmartX. It was free for me to sign up. I just went online, purchased my tickets. We then saved this to the Apple Wallet, and then we could use this to swipe our QR code at the station at the turnstile. You can buy reserved or unreserved tickets. We personally bought reserved tickets just because it only cost £5 more. And we got a guaranteed seat on the train. And so for us, the extra cost was worth the stress reduction. Non-reserved is a little bit cheaper, but if it's a busy day and there is not enough seats, then you won't be allowed on the train. So how unreserved works is you have to get to the platform earlier and queue in the unreserved areas on the platform and hope that you'll get a space. The trains I were on just after the marathon, they weren't too crowded. So if you had an unreserved, you might have gotten a seat. But in busier periods like the Sakura season, the cherry blossom season in April, that would be much less likely. So personally, for the sake of calm and not wanting to risk it, it was only £5 more. Reserved was the way to go for us. Now, I hope I have taken one for the team on this trip, because Mum and I almost wasted an entire Saturday afternoon, the day before the marathon, trying to do a Shinkansen trail run. We wanted to try and print off our tickets early and also find the Shinkansen platforms, and it ended up being quite the disaster. However, thankfully for you, I can now pass on this wisdom because actually it was fairly straightforward. I think we just somehow complicated it. But we did learn some things doing this for ourselves and now to pass on to you. So my advice would be definitely have a translation app on your phone because most of the train staff didn't know English and the train translation app really helped. It's also just nice through the trip to be able to write messages to locals. Me and Mum popped into a Japanese gallery at one point and we were able to have a beautiful conversation with the owner using the app and find out the reason behind his artwork and where he painted them. And we just had a really wonderful, joyful conversation that happened in a few other shops as well. And the locals just really appreciated the effort that you went to. And it also just makes solving your problem a lot quicker. You don't need to print off your tickets, or at least on SmartX, we didn't need to do that. We just needed to log back into the website and save our Shinkansen tickets in our Apple Wallet. We did also keep making a mess of this as well, as we kept trying to generate a new code every time we went to do it. And it just was actually a lot more straightforward. So just go into the ticket in your app and then download that straight to your phone wallet. Tokyo Station is huge and all of the Shinkansen trains were upstairs. And I found that to be a case for all of the train stations that we went to. So give yourself plenty of time to get there and navigate the train station that you're in. I think they recommend being on the train platform at least 15 minutes before your Shinkansen arrives. The train platforms are very long as well, so it takes you a little while to get to your carriage, and not all of the train lines had it go in the same order. So I would definitely get there early to make sure that you get to your train carriage in the right way. So give time for that, give extra time for any toilet breaks, buying any food or drinks you want there, because there's actually lots of great restaurants and shops, at least in Tokyo Station there was. And I will advise as well, there's definitely a lot more options in the main train section of the station. There's less options when you go through to the Shinkansen area. So if you see something you like before you go to the Shinkansen area, I'd recommend getting it there and then. But just leave yourself lots of time for going to get on the Shinkansen, because as I say, it really is huge, a lot of these stations. So you don't want to cut yourself short. I also think it's a bonus getting to the platform early. We had such a great time taking photos and videos of the Shinkansens coming in. That's such a lovely part of the experience, and it's really a sight to watch. I also thought all the Shinkansens were white, and I was pleasantly surprised to see lots of jazzy and snazzy colours. So I've become a bit of a Shinkansen train spotter. At the station, follow the signs for the Shinkansen area. When you get to the turnstiles, you scan your QR code on the little screen, but don't rush off when you go through the turnstile, because when you do the QR code, it generates a little paper ticket. You need to grab that on the way through, and you must have that on the train with you for your ticket to be valid. We also found out that we needed to deactivate our Suica card for a short while because it kept interfering when we tried to do the QR code. If this is the case for you, then don't worry, it's actually really easy. We just went to our Apple Wallet, we clicked on the top corner of the Suica card, I think it was like 3 little dots, and then you choose to delete the Suica card. Now, again, don't worry, we took one for the team here. It does not remove your balance. You don't lose all your money. You just delete it, and then you re-add it afterwards, and the balance will come back. So we tried and tested it. So to re-add it, you just go to Add to Wallet, choose Previous Cards, and then you press on your Suica card and you add it back to your wallet. Now, it's amazing that Japanese transport is so punctual, but that also means that they do not wait around. They leave at the exact time they say on the ticket and not a second later. So they will board you early and they will board you quickly. So I really would make sure that you're on the platform at least 15 minutes in advance to it arriving, and make sure you get on and depart the train swiftly. The train itself was super clean, very spacious. And like I said, it's really hard to get your head around how silent it is. And it's like a little silent rocket because you cover so much distance in such a short amount of time. I couldn't believe that we got to Osaka in only a couple of hours. We also very much enjoyed some of the English translations we heard on the train. I think there was a bit of lost in translation there. Like I said, because the trains were very punctual, the guard would announce on the train, basically saying, start getting ready now if your stop's coming off, just so you get off in time. But this actually translated as, be ready to get off the train before it stops moving. So you can imagine the nervous foreign faces looking at each other, thinking that we're going to have to jump off a bullet train before it stops moving. But so that tickled us greatly. Don't worry, they do allow the train to stop before you get off, but they are pretty quick about getting you off the train. During our trip, Google Maps was our best friend for navigating transport, especially for the subways and buses. I wish that when we look up train stuff in the UK, it looked like it was just as efficient. It looks super complicated at first, but when you know how to read the info, it's actually really simple and it's incredibly helpful. So you just need to know what you're looking for. So I'd advise in your Maps app, typing in your current destination and then the destination you want to finish at. And make sure you select the train option at top and then you ask for the best route. It will also tell you how much to expect to pay for that journey in yen, which was really helpful. So I'd say most journeys were around 230 to 400 yen per ride. So in English, that's about £2.50 to £4. Obviously, if you have one of those 24, 72-hour tickets, as long as it's the TUI or Metro line, it's unlimited for that time period. It will start by, on the app, it will start by telling you how to walk to the name of the station. And it will also say the best entrance, because these stations are big, the best entrance to go through to get to your destination. Underneath the name of the station, at least on Google Maps, it will have the name of the train line in a bright colour. For example, the Chuo line, which is bright orange. You would then follow all the bright orange signs in the station that say Chuo line. Once you get close to the Chuo line, you will see in the instructions it gives you a platform number. So make sure you're on the right number side of the platform, just like most train stations. At least that's the same thing in the UK. You just make sure you're on the right number platform. Next to where it says on the phone the name of the line in a bright colour, it also says the name of the direction you want to be heading in. For example, Tokyo, and what type of train you want to get on. So rapid. For example, some of the rapid trains, that's important. They'll comment if it's a rapid train. If it's a rapid train, it means it will only stop at certain stops. So if you need that one, it's important to go on that because the other train might not have your stop. If you then looked at the electronic board, you would expect it to say when the next rapid train is going, that is headed to Tokyo. That's no different. For example, in the UK, you'd be looking on the board to see what train is going to London Waterloo, and then checking that it stops off at London Vauxhall. Underneath this on the app, it will tell you how many stops you'll travel on that train before you get off. So, for example, ride 4 stops, and this will take 14 minutes. It will also tell you the name of the station you want to travel to, and next to it, it will have a circle symbol with letters and a number. So, for example, JC05. So that is the number platform that you're looking out for. Amazingly, all of the trains in Tokyo had announcements in both Japanese and English. That was very kind and welcoming. So this helped a lot on the train because often they would announce the name, but not every train did that. Many of the trains would also show an electronic screen with the stops in both English and Japanese. Also very helpful, but not every train did that. So if you can know the number of your platform that you need to get off at, for example, JCO5, you can just look out for that symbol appearing on the screen or appearing on the station as you come into it. That makes it a lot easier to navigate. The Maps app then also tells you at the end which signs to follow for the closest exit to your desired destination. So when you're walking through that station, you know to head to B12, for example. A lot of these stations are very big with lots of exits. So if you do that, that will be the one closest to your finish point. And if you really want to be efficient, a lot of these map apps will also tell you the best carriage number to get on so that you have a quick exit the other end. So genius, really, very useful stuff. I know it sounds complicated when you think, oh my goodness, there's so much to keep up with. But actually, if you look at the screen and you follow it in that order, it becomes very clear and it's actually unbelievably helpful. And it's just Japanese efficiency at its finest. The map apps do the same process pretty much for the buses in Japan as well. Something I miss greatly about the Japanese train stations is that every station had its own little train jingle. So it was very hard to be at the station, not have a smile on your face and want to do a little jiggle. The UK train platforms are far more boring, I can tell you that. I wished we had some little train jiggles, especially with how unpunctual our train is. I think everyone would be a little happier maybe if we had a little jingle to at least dance to. For the internet, many areas of Tokyo and Japan had free Wi-Fi around the city. Not as much in Kyoto, as it's a more traditional city, or at least we were in the Gion area, so not as much there. And I was able to use this most days. However, I would recommend speaking to your phone company, as a lot of them offer very reasonable data day package rates, or at least ours did. So I think we paid about £7 a day and it was capped, which was really helpful as well. And how that worked was, as soon as we turned our phone data on, we would be charged that full £7, whether we used it for a minute or we could use it for 24 hours. So obviously, if you've turned it on and you've been charged, you might as well use it for the day. You can also buy portable Wi-Fi. There are different companies that offer this. You can also get dual SIM cards, but we found for us the cheapest option was the phone company. It also was the most convenient as well, and it just saves us a lot of time and money. It was really useful as well using Google Maps for walking around the city to find restaurants and various places, because as you can predict, and so they should, all of these street signs are written in Japanese. So you could use the arrow to help you walk around the city on the Maps app. I think that is everything I can think of in terms of helpful tips and logistics. So I hope that can be helpful on your trip. We got a few great recommendations. We got a few great tips when we went, and it certainly made things a lot easier for us. So now the more exciting stuff, let's talk about the experience itself. I absolutely loved Japan. It well and truly stole my heart. It was a trip of a lifetime. It's one of those places, it might be top of your list already, or it might have been somewhere in your list and you thought it'd be cool, but absolutely far blew my expectations out of the water. Like I said, my mum came with me to support, and she absolutely loved it too. She's 62 and I was mega impressed with how much walking she did with me. And I don't say that in a patronizing way because of her age. I say that because anyone who knows me knows I go a little overboard with walking. Like, I would literally walk until I ran out of earth if I could. So I was very impressed with her keeping pace with me. We both felt very safe in the city, both during the day and the night. And we even split up at various times as well to do our own thing. And we never felt concerned for ourselves or the others' safety, which was very empowering, because I couldn't say the same about walking around at night, at least where I live. On the day we arrived, we had a pretty magical experience when we were coming into land at the airport. We were just coming down over the sea, and the plane wing, we were on the left hand side, and the plane dipped slightly, and the wing just all of a sudden, as if out of nowhere, revealed Mount Fuji. And my mum actually got an amazing video of it. She was videoing the landing anyway, and then out of nowhere Mount Fuji appeared, which was like a great kick of excitement right from the start. As I said, we got through immigration quickly. I think a huge part of that was because we used that website to get our forms done in advance. As I say, it was a completely free service. We then, when we got there, we spoke to the lovely lady at the information desk, and she helped us buy our subway tickets and also gave us a few tips on what route to go and how best to navigate that. I won't lie, and I'll say it was tough working out the trains on the first day with the jet lag. But I think both Mum and I would agree that we'd still probably do this again, as it really set us up well for the rest of the trip. So early on, we'd already got it sorted out. And hopefully now you've got my tips, it'll be even easier for you. Our flight landed early morning. And it's pretty standard for most hotels in Japan to only allow check-in from 3 p.m. So we had a lot of time to kill. Thankfully, we could go to our hotel and drop off our bags. We were staying in Shinjuku, so we decided to take a few stops on the train to Shibuya to see the crossing. So that was quite overwhelming, but in a good way, that we just landed and a few hours later, it's like, it felt surreal that we're suddenly in Japan, in the chaos, the very well organized chaos of Shibuya crossing. We visited a few stores like the Nintendo stores, the Pokemon Center, and we also went to Loft, which is a very cool Japanese store. It has lots of floors containing, I think they would describe it as household goods. But essentially, like, every floor is different. There was like arts and crafts. There was all sorts. And we actually got some great gifts, like really lovely wooden postcards. And there's quite lovely little art pieces that we ended up getting for relatives. We then went back to the hotel. We were staying at the Appa Hotel Higashi Shinjuku Kabukicho. Sorry about my accent. And this was actually the only hotel left in our budget range when we booked. Now, on reflection, it was a fine and pleasant stay. Some might even say it was quite charming. But I will share some notes for this exact hotel. So, number one, Appa Hotels is a big chain in Japan. So even where we were staying in that small area, there was 3 of them in that tiny perimeter. So make sure you know exactly which one is yours, because especially with jet lag, that became very confusing on the first day and just made it even longer to find it when we were tired. Number 2, and I lost a lot of daughter points for this. This particular Appa hotel was on what we ended up calling Nightclub Alley. And it's this alley, as you could imagine, it's an alley full of Japanese nightclubs that were alive and kicking from about 10 p.m. until about 5 a.m. And I feel like I was fully immersed in the experience with them. So I somehow missed this in the hotel reviews when booking. I also missed that it was perfectly in the middle of 2 major hospitals or trauma centers. So we had all of that wonderful background noise and blaring sirens going, especially through the night. So yes, my companion was not best pleased. And number 3, the hotel rooms were also very compact. You could literally be in the bathroom, taking 2 steps from the door, or from the door to the bed, it was 4 steps, and there was barely any extra space. So you've been pre-warned on those things. However, I will say that this room won on character, and we weirdly missed our little room once we left, and it served the purpose well, and it was within our budget for the marathon. And it grew on us. The noise definitely didn't, or at least it did for me, but maybe not so much for my mum. But maybe some good earplugs if you are going to be there. That would be pretty essential, and hopefully you'll be fine. But the staff were really friendly, really helpful. We did the paid breakfast buffet on a number of the mornings. There was lots of great options there, and it was really helpful as well, because we could try lots of little Japanese foods, have some breakfast, some items that we're also familiar with, and it just meant as well that we were quite full for most of the day, so we didn't have to worry too much about lunch either, and then we could just have a really nice dinner out. And then the hotel also had an onsen, which was one of my favorite experiences of the whole trip. I was actually really sad because our other hotels didn't have one. If you haven't heard of it before, in Japan, onsens are hot springs and the bathing facilities and traditional inns around them. There's lots of outdoor onsens in Japan, but some hotels have handmade ones indoors. And our hotel one was incredible. Now, another pre-warning, this is very important, because in Japanese culture, you bathe naked publicly. So the men and women often bathe separately. But if in most areas, if not all, it is mandatory, so compulsory, to bathe naked in the onsens and the public baths. So our hotel provided us with very cute traditional Japanese robes and slippers. So that was fun for a few pictures. And towels. So we could wear those down to the changing room area. You then strip and put your belongings in your locker. I could bring a towel into the onsen with me, and then you can put it to the side, shower, and then you get in the onsen. Now, us Brits can be quite prude with things like that. So it definitely did cause some pre-bathing nerves, knowing that I'd have to strip down in the changing rooms and then enter the onsen wearing my birthday suit in front of strangers. But I got over it very quickly, and I actually found it an extremely liberating experience. I'm so glad I did it. Like I said, it was one of my favorite parts of the trip. I met so many incredible ladies in there from all over the world. Absolutely nobody cared what each other looked like. We weren't comparing who had bigger baps or looking to see if anyone had scars. At the end of the day, we all have bodies. We all hopefully appreciate the wonderful things that our bodies do for us. And we all just happily chatted away. I, of course, managed to suss out the marathon runners within about 30 seconds. We spied each other's marathon wristbands. But yeah, I just met so many different ladies, and it was so nice and liberating to just let go of any self-judgment. So I strongly encourage you to seek out an onsen whilst you're in Japan. Even if you just try it the once, you might find it a really liberating experience too. My hotel one was open from 6 a.m. to midnight. So that was an absolute dream after a long day of sightseeing, or especially on the evening after the marathon. And like I said, I was absolutely gutted that none of my other hotels had one. I missed that the most. It was very windy the first day that we were there. I thought I was going to get blown away, but thankfully the wind improved and we got really lucky with the weather actually during our trip. It was cold for most of it, but I don't think I'd actually want to be in Japan when it was boiling hot. I think that would have been quite overwhelming. So it was a nice level of cool. And then we got nice sunny weather on the Friday before the marathon, and the marathon itself ended up being a heat wave, which 21 marathons in, and most of them being heat waves, I probably shouldn't be surprised at this point. If you are running the marathon, please do not obsess over the weather in the weeks leading up to the race. I get it, and it's hard not to do when the nerves kicking and you just want to feel some sense of control. But one, there is absolutely nothing you can do to change the weather. You cannot control it. It's going to do what it does. But number two, I cannot tell you how many times the weather reports changed in the lead up to that race. Even the week or a few days before, the weather was changing all the time. I think it predicted every weather under the sun. And in the end, it was a nice, cool morning on marathon day. And then it was sunny all day. But I think leading up to it, there was going to be like torrential wind, torrential rain, maybe even some snow. And on the day, it ended out just fine. So try your very best not to worry about the things you can't control. Look at what you can control in that situation. And that is just having a plan of what you would wear based on different weathers. For example, maybe trying wearing a longer sleeve top or gloves if you need to, trialing some different shorts if it's going to be hot, and then just also having a plan of how you're going to adjust your fuel on the day in case that's affected by weather change as well. But don't stress about it is what I would say. And also for the travel side of things, layers will be your best friend. So we try to pack as light as possible, only pack one coat, etc., and then just just really relied on layers because, as I say, it was cold. Some days were slightly warm, just so we had different options. On our first full day of travel, me and mum packed loads in. And I think when you see what we packed in, we were quite impressed with how much we did. But at the same time, I don't feel like we rushed anything. It wasn't like we went to a place, saw it quickly, and then rushed off. We spent a decent amount of time and really explored the area. So it was nice to know that there was a lot, like, even though we packed a lot in, I don't think like we rushed anything. I think a good part of that was just because we had a little pre-plan. We only planned once we were there. We didn't really plan the sightseeing too much beforehand. But when we were there, we just looked at what made geographical sense. So, for example, on the first day, we explored the Sensoji area and then walked across to the Tokyo Skytree, as they're very close. On the way to the Skytree, we also saw what looked like a massive golden, I thought it was a pear on top of this building, right? And I was fascinated by how many people must have been behind the decision, the creative process of this giant pear on the building. I still don't know what the purpose was for this giant golden thing. Apparently, the locals call it the golden turd. So look out for that, and I guess make of it what you will. It certainly amused me greatly. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Did you see it? What did you think it was? Um, Let me know. And if you actually know its purpose, because I still don't. The Skytree was reasonably priced, and it was a lovely day when we were there. So we decided to go up it and explore the two viewing floors. There was lots of great views. We got to see Mount Fuji really clearly that day as well. I also had a cheeky look through the glass floor. My mum was not so keen to join me on that part. I will say the queue for the Skytree was quite deceptive. So there was two parts. The first part to get the tickets flowed quite quickly, but the second part, when you're queuing for the elevator doors, had like a hidden long weaving queue. So be aware of that if you've got time constraints and you've got certain times you have to be somewhere. But I'd probably say it took an extra 20 to 30 minutes. So not too bad. And the queue coming down moved pretty quickly. I'd recommend giving yourself time to explore around the Skytree area. There's really nice food places and shops around. It's also quite nice to just sit and hang outside. That is also something else you'll discover in Tokyo. There are so many like underground villages that all the locals hang out in. It reminded me of Tokyo in that sense. And you could easily have no idea. You could have gone to Tokyo and had no idea about these things. So I found that they're usually off the entrances underneath to subway stations. And also, if you find yourself walking around in circles, not understanding where something is, but it's showing you're there on your maps, it's probably underground is the answer. I found that out the hard way, unfortunately, the night before the marathon, when I spent about an hour trying to find a pizza place that was actually underneath me the whole time. So if you can't find it, it's probably underneath. And yeah, all over the city, there's some really lovely underneath sort of shopping villages, I'd say, that have lots of restaurants and cool little stores. In the Skytree food area, I was delighted to see that there was a strawberry mania store. That is something that had come highly recommended to me. It's like a strawberry themed confectionery store, I guess. And I bought this strawberry shortcake dessert that was absolutely delightful. I enjoyed every mouthful. When I got back to the hotel, I think I had two during the trip. And the Japanese really do think of everything. Like, even the packaging was so thoughtful and so like genius. They'd included a little throwaway ice pack to keep it cold. Genius. They'd included a cardboard holder to stop the dessert sliding around all over the place. Genius. And they also had a little holder for my spoons so it didn't keep like sliding into the cream. Just like genius stuff that you didn't even know you needed. And speaking of stuff you didn't know you needed, I never realized how much I would enjoy having my butt warmed while sitting on the toilet seat. All of the toilet seats in Japan were heated, sometimes to different levels. I found that out. Think I almost burnt my butt one day. I don't know how cold the person before me was. But if you've been to Japan, I expect you're nodding your head vigorously right now, or maybe even chuckling too, because I think Japanese toilets are the best in the world. They do everything. And no toilet is the same. Everyone seems to have flush in a different place. I think I spent more time looking for where the flush button or flush handle was than I actually spent on the toilet. It was an adventure every time. Some of the toilets were themed as well. I found myself in a toilet with Godzilla dolls. Another one had fake toy sharks. I had different art displays going on. Every public toilet I went in had Roland surround sound, so like no expense spared. And that was because you could push a button and rainwater noise would start playing. Now, I don't know if this was meant to drown out the sounds of you trying to ease out a number two, or just for your general well-being to create a sense of calm. But it was a wonderful novelty either way. There were seats you could pull down from the wall to stick your child in and have a bit of bonding, or just make sure they don't run off. And all of the bathrooms were so clean. So basically, they made the toilet experience so nice that I think a lot of people didn't even want to leave, me included. And in fact, in one of the public bathrooms, they actually had a sign on the back of the door saying that if you spent too long in the toilet, the disaster prevention team would have to come, which I think is brilliant. So, and I would argue sometimes going to the toilet is avoiding a disaster, but then how long is too long? So I've got a lot of questions. So I wanted to test. I wanted to test this theory, but unfortunately, I didn't have time. Ironically, but if you have ever been in a Japanese public toilet and you've been visited by the disaster prevention team, please do get in contact with me, because I have a lot of questions. Like, how long is too long? Following the Skytree, we got back on the subway and we visited the Zojoji Temple and the Tokyo Tower, as they were also next to each other. And here I ended up taking not only my favorite video of the trip, but possibly my favorite video of all time, because we were taking some photos and then all of a sudden a local woman pushing a pram full of dogs whilst walking besides her pet hedgehog came along. Now, at first, I wasn't sure what was going on. I thought she was actually kind of just blocking the road so the hedgehog could walk to safety. But I've since found out that this woman is known as the famous hedgehog woman of Tokyo, and that is in fact her pet hedgehog. So do look out for them both. I hope they are well. In the evening, we started to feel the jet lag, so we made sure we stayed close to our hotel in the Shinjuku area. We had thankfully, we were quite close to the famous Golden Geese, so that was quite nice to walk around. That's like a connection of small alleyways. It's got about 200 little local bars. We didn't go in any of them. I don't think drinking the jet lag would have helped, but it was fun to wander around them and look at all of the lights and the lanterns. We then went and shared some pizza and pasta, which you might be thinking like, Meg, what are you doing? You're in Japan. Why are you having Italian food? But Japan is actually known for making some of the best pizzas outside of Italy, and they kind of have their own very light texture to them, their own style. So we were keen to test this. And I have to say, they were amazing. We went to a tiny little restaurant called Rise Mize. That was honestly the best pizza we had during our whole time in Japan. So I highly recommend. You couldn't reserve there. For the marathon, like the night before the marathon, I would fully recommend if there's somewhere you'd like to go, try and find somewhere you can pre-book, just because, as you can imagine, the night before, everyone's going to be trying to carb load. But I think you'll find a lot of especially a lot of the restaurants are quite small in Japan, in Tokyo. So a lot of them you can't reserve. So for that, what I would do, I try and go I try and go to those ones, not the night before the marathon, if you don't want to be waiting around. But any other time, I'd either try and go earlier in the evening. I found it was quicker to get into those types of restaurants, or just be prepared to wait around a little bit. But I highly recommend Rise Mice. They had a little TV for sports, and I was delighted to see the women's football on whilst we were there. So represent, that made me happy. And the food was fantastic, and the staff were very attentive. Me and my mum shared a pizza and some pasta between us to get the best of both worlds. But please remember, it is considered rude to tip in most places in Japan. So just be aware of that, unless they have a tip jar requesting them. So you'll know it'll be okay. Otherwise, this would be considered rude. And I will put the name of the restaurants in the show notes, the episode description, as a reminder. The next day, it was bib pickup day for me. So I left mum at the hotel and I headed to the Expo. It was very easy to navigate there, but it was absolutely jam-packed. I think I left about 9 a.m. and I seemed to be in rush hour. But despite it being rush hour, people were traveling in just absolute silence with minimal chaos. It was very impressive to witness. I guess people just had places to be. They had their head down and quietly made their way to where they needed to go. So absolutely packed station, but very quiet apart from those delightful little plane jingles. The Tokyo Marathon Expo is at Tokyo's famous big site exhibition space, and that is in the Docklands area. So it was nice to see a different area of Tokyo. And Japan, again, like they're very clever in their thinking. I found that actually all of the big stadiums, big exhibition spaces, they'd all been kind of grouped in one area. All of the nightclubs have been grouped in another area. So kind of these contained areas that actually make a lot of sense. The expo was in this big building that looked like something out of the Avengers. Like it could have been the Avengers headquarters. It just kind of appeared looming in the distance in these docklands, and it was like this huge upside down triangular structure. I felt very important walking up to it. As I say, I felt like it was my first day as an Avenger. The directions for the Marathon Expo were really well signposted, and there were lots of staff. The queue getting into the building itself was fairly quick. However, once inside, it really did become a bit of a roulette, depending on what bib desk number you had been given. So, for example, I randomly met the MEG Method podcast listener in the queue, the lovely Chris from the USA, and we got split up once we got to the desk section. I was desk 16 and it took me about 10 minutes, and I think it took him well over an hour. He was desk 5 to get his bib. So unfortunately, you don't really have a say in what desk number. Desks 1 to 10 seem to have the longest queues. Hopefully the organisers will take on some feedback next year and make that a bit more even. But if you are going with friends, just be aware that your bib lines might take vastly different times. And the expo really was the anomaly in the whole Tokyo Marathon experience. Like every part of the marathon really was exceptional. You'll be sick of hearing me say the word efficient, but it really was an efficiency masterclass. But that just didn't translate into the expo. I don't know whether that's because they were so exceptional elsewhere that as soon as there was a small thing, it seemed like a big thing. So that's still a compliment in a way. But I do think there could have been a lot of improvements that can be made to the expo to hopefully give a better overall experience in the future. Thankfully, my expo experience was not too chaotic. I got my bib number quickly. I got my wristband and my bib validated with no issues. And I also didn't want any merch. So I did not have to stand. I think I was there fairly early, and it was, I think, nearly a 2-hour queue for the merch store. which apparently there was lots of people fighting in, ripping clothes out of each other's hands. People were getting pushed over. So that is a big no, thank you for me. I would definitely recommend ordering your clothes online to your hotel in advance. I think they gave a small window where you could actually buy some of those items online and send it. So if you haven't got a Japanese postcode, you could send it to your hotel. So I definitely advise that. That seems a better option for me. And then for the long term, hopefully the race organizers will improve the Expo store process. I think it might be quite controversial, but I actually think only runners should be able to purchase merch from the store. And they could do that by showing their bib number once they've got it. As proof, I think that would be a lot fairer. And also to limit to one of each style of clothing per person. I honestly don't see why anyone needs to buy 10 lots of the same style jacket. So that's just my thoughts. And I'd love to know other runners' thoughts on this, how you think that can be improved. And, hopefully they'll make some changes in the future. So ultimately, I stayed away from the chaos. I had a wonderful time. I met so many of lovely people that came up to me to say they listened to the MEG Method podcast. So thank you for everyone who did come and say hi and get a cuddle. It really was the people that made the expo and just the whole experience so great for me. And speaking of amazing humans, in my desk here, I met, big up desk 16, I met an incredible woman called Deb, and I genuinely believe it must have been fate that we met, because not only did we become quick friends and walked around the expo together, but Deb also very generously and randomly offered me 2 of her spare tickets to visit the Ghibli museum with her and a friend that afternoon. But what is crazy is that when Deb offered these tickets, she had no idea that earlier that morning I had naively looked online to buy tickets to the Ghibli museum. It was one of the top things I wanted to do on my list. And I'd found out the tickets had all sold out. But not only just sold out, they'd sold out months in advance, and I was gutted about it. So what are the chances that I randomly make a new friend in Deb, and without even mentioning it, she offers them? So I absolutely had to join Deb, and we had the best day. She invited my mum along as well. And so me, my mum, Deb, and her other friend, Deb. So yes, the 2 Debs, as we named them. We went there after the expo. My mum joined us there. And I fully recommend you try go to the Ghibli Museum if you can. It was one of our favorite places the whole trip. If you are a fan of the Studio Ghibli films, then you already know that you are going to have the best time. It was at the top of the bucket list for me, and you'll love every minute of it. But even if you've never heard of Studio Ghibli before, it's still worth going and looking around. The museum's beautiful. You get to see all the art from the films. There's beautiful animations and behind the scenes. And also the Mitaka area that the Ghibli Museum was in was also really charming to look around and explore. So thank you, Deb. You are loved, and I had the absolute best day with you, and it created a real core memory for me and my mum. So thank you so much, and I look forward to catching up soon. We're friends for life. Now, I'm no stranger to little earthquakes and aftershocks, as I spent a lot of time living in LA. But let me tell you, the one that we got woken up by on Friday morning in Tokyo, I do not want to experience again. It was significant enough to wake me up. It lasted for a whole minute, and our hotel was literally rocking away. So I don't think I got any sleep for the rest of the early hours of Friday morning, and I don't think I got to sleep on Friday evening either. So for anyone wanting to visit Japan, do not worry about it, as it's not something you can change. And there were actually, when we looked it up to be like, what was that? We saw that actually there was tons of little aftershocks happening that had been happening all week, and we didn't even know they were happening. And that's just daily life for the locals there. But every now and then you might feel slightly bigger aftershock. So it's not something to panic about. It's normal daily life there, but it's definitely something to be aware of. And it was a really good, important reminder for us to make sure that we knew our hotel's earthquake and emergency procedures to be on the safe side. So yeah, an everyday normality for the locals, not something to get really worried about, but something to be aware of and good to know what you would do in that situation. On the Friday morning, we went to Tokyo Labs, which was an incredible indoor interactive experience. I had 2 friends recommend this to me. There is 2 in the Tokyo area, and we went to the one called Planet. And again, one of the favorite activities we did there. I won't spoil it for you and let you know what to expect. But one thing I will say is that there are some areas of the Planet Tokyo Labs where you will be wading through water up to just below your knees. So I would wear shorts or trousers that roll up that day. But if you can't, then you can get some free ones from the venue. But we absolutely loved it, and we would thoroughly recommend. Thankfully, despite there being a forecast for Friday being the worst weather day, it actually turned out to be a beautiful, lovely, warm weather day. So we strolled around the outside of the Imperial Palace after Tokyo Labs, and then we went to Yoyogi Park and saw the Meiji Shrine. We then finished off by going up to the top of the government building in Shinjuku to watch the sunset over the city. It's definitely worth doing. It's completely free to do. We went on the 1st of March, and I checked my phone pictures and saw that we got up there for 5:15 and the sun was just starting to set at that time of the year. So it was perfect timing. We got to see the view from the daytime, during the sunset, and nighttime as well. And it really was amazing views of the city. And you can see Mount Fuji really clearly on a clear day. During our stay there, they had a light display event going, and that took place every night, I think between 7 to 9 p.m. And that repeated every half an hour, and that projected onto the outside of the government building. So once we came down from the top of it, we crossed the road and we sat down and we watched the light display, and that was a lot of fun. So have a check if that's on at the time of year that you are going. But if it is on, I definitely recommend. The day before the marathon started out with a very cold and windy morning, but thankfully my heart was warm and full as I met up with an incredible group of my podcast listeners and some of my clients for a 5K ShakeOut Run. What we did is we used it as an opportunity to do a trial walk to our marathon start entrance area, and then we walked across to Chuo Park together and ran around that. They've got different pathways you can run around. We did our 5K, and then we got some coffee and some pastry together because you got to finish right. That was also another huge highlight of my trip. I heard so many incredible and inspiring stories that morning. So thank you so much to everyone who shared their morning with me. It really was so special, getting to put faces to the names, being lucky enough to hear your stories, hearing your reasons to run, and I'll remember that for a very long time. I then met up with my mum again, and we went and saw the Godzilla head and looked around the Kabuchiko Tower area with all of its lights. There's lots of interesting themed restaurants around. There's arcades, capsule stores. We then went and had a chaotic afternoon at the Tokyo station for our trial run for the Shinkansens, as I mentioned. But thankfully, like I said, hopefully you'll now benefit from the lessons we learned. We then finally went and had an early dinner at an Italian restaurant that we pre-booked by my friend David Yim's suggestion. We discussed this chain of Italian restaurants in the episode 138 of the podcast, which is all about the Tokyo Marathon. And I think us speaking about this on there actually resulted in multiple of their restaurants being fully booked across the city for that Saturday evening before the marathon. So I think we should put Yimmy on commission. They have a lot to thank him for. I will admit, that I did spend an hour trying to find my branch of the train because it was hidden underground in what was called the Subnade shopping village, which was near Shinjuku station. So another reminder, if the map app says you're there and you can't see it, it may be underneath you. The food there was great, and I was sufficiently carb loaded. So after eating, Mum and I went back to the hotel for an early night. I had another delightful trip to the hotel onsen, which helped me sleep right through the night until the morning, which is honestly the best sleep that I've had before the race. Both of my world records were done on zero sleep, and I wouldn't recommend it. So I was very grateful to have such a good night's sleep this time around. And I think the onsen helped. I think that's the key. I have to do a spa night before every marathon. The marathon itself was just the most amazing day. I was blown away by the whole experience from start to finish. It was a masterclass of Japanese efficiency. I told you, keep hearing me say that, but it's true. Like how it was run, the locals were absolutely incredible. They were shouting and supporting along the whole course. I've never experienced a marathon as well where the supporters were more dressed up than the marathon runners. But I absolutely loved it, and it kept me entertained during the whole race. The race was a very hot one. And weirdly, despite all the tall buildings and how much you felt the wind like a wind tunnel earlier in the week, there was actually barely any coverage from the sun. So it really made it the sun go down on you on the day. So definitely have your sunscreen ready just in case. Even with some sunscreen on, I was a lobster afterwards. So if it's sunny, there's not much coverage. I try to find the shadows where I can, but just something to be aware of. You can't control it again, but putting things like sunscreen on just can help make it easier for you. Prior to this whole trip, I'd unfortunately been suffering with endometriosis. And it was so bad that I couldn't run for a couple of months leading up to the race. There was a point where I was wondering if I could run at all. So I felt extremely grateful to be at that start line. But I knew that I was going to have to take it very easily. Unfortunately, it was really bad on the day. I really felt it. So I had to take it even easier than I thought. However, if there was any race in the world where I was going to just be open to the experience and pay attention, then the Tokyo Marathon was it. And now, thankfully, I've just had an operation to help remove areas of the endometriosis. So hopefully a lot less painful future. But I think it says a lot about how amazing the race experience was, that even though I was in so much pain, I still had the absolute best day. And that's honestly the truth. I would love to do it all over again. It was brilliant. I got to hang out for a short while with my lovely online client, Jane, in her warm hotel room right by the start line. And I felt very grateful not to have to queue up for the start line portaloos. So thank you, Jane. And I honestly had the best morning with you, both on the Saturday and the Sunday. That was so special to spend time with you. And I'm so proud with how the race went for you. You put a lot of hard work into that, and you deserve the result you got. I then hung out with my fellow charity friends, Russ and Mike, at the start line. I was proud to wear my Young Lives versus Cancer vest again, which is the reason I run. I run in memory of my friend Rob, and that's been the driving force behind all the 21 marathons I've run so far. And would you believe this? Out of 38,000 runners, I randomly bumped into my new friend Deb again. So I really believe me and Deb were meant to meet this trip, and she's absolutely fab. So Russ and Deb and I ran some of the first miles together, which was lots of fun. And Deb and Russ absolutely smashed their PBs that day. So I'm mega proud of them. Even in that hot weather, they absolutely flew. So well done, both of you. And I hope you're still celebrating. A quick note for marathon runners, particularly slower runners. The marathon start line experience was so efficient. I know, again, sick of me using that word, but it's true. The volunteers were so friendly, and they made it so easy. It was really quick and easy to get into the area. There was no need to get there mega early from my experience. I know a lot of the slower runners wanted to get there as early as possible to make sure that they would be at the start of the wave because they were nervous about cut-off times. But we took our time getting into our wave, and there was still tons of space to get to the front. And we looked at the waves around us, and it was a similar thing. So definitely be proactive about making sure you can get to the front of your wave if that's what you need. But you really don't have to get there mega early. It was much more easy to do on the day than you would have thought. I very much enjoyed seeing a man wearing his wife's old coat to keep him warm at the start line before throwing it away. I appreciated his resourcefulness. And again, the atmosphere was just a wonderful buzz, and everyone was very friendly and just really looking out for each other. You could really tell everyone wanted to have the best race possible. And the race itself was just the most heartwarming experiences. It was one of the few races where I didn't actually have my name on the front of my charity vest. And yet somehow I had so many fellow runners call out to me during the race to tell me that they listened to my podcast, like Alberto near the halfway point. I had Christina at 40 km who was smashing her first marathon. She came running up to the side of me and said, "Hey, I listened to your start line meditation this morning. I was really nervous and it sorted me out and has calmed my nerves," which I couldn't believe it. But I'm so grateful to everyone who said hi and shared a few miles and shared their stories with me. Like, you didn't just make my day, you made my year. It was really lovely to put some faces to names and connect with you all, because that's what it's about for me. I absolutely adore coaching. It's my passion. So for you to go out of your way and say that my coaching has helped you in some way, that just made my heart soar. It's not about me. I do this for you. So to hear that is helpful to you just lets me know that I'm on the right path. So thank you. And the whole day, like I said, was just incredible. It absolutely wasn't the silent disco this year. So I wonder if last year COVID had a lot to play with that, because it was the first year it was back and there was still lots of restrictions. So maybe people were nervous. But this year, the locals supported loud and proud. The volunteers were so efficient and friendly. And the camaraderie between runners was actually some of the best I've ever experienced during a race. I'd say maybe only second the London Marathon. And I think that's because they are so great at celebrating every runner. They really put a lot of work into trying to create that welcoming culture. You also got to see a lot of great sightseeing during the run. I'm always so grateful to get special access to these incredible cities during a marathon. It's a real privilege, and Tokyo had so many traditional musicians and dancers performing along the route. So yeah, I felt very, very fortunate, and it really was very special. My mum also navigated the city on her own like an absolute pro. I think she managed to cheer me on at about 4 different spots. So yeah, I loved it. The app was really useful as well for supporters. My mum was showing it afterwards. You could take photos and upload it. So if not all your family members could come, if someone could upload a photo and they could see that from home. So it was quite interactive and useful as well. So hopefully that's just something to note if you've got anyone supporting you. And yeah, I loved it. I fully recommend to anyone considering. And I'd say it's now my second favorite major marathon after London. And it was even close competition to London, which I'd never thought I'd say. I'd run London 3 times. It's my favorite race in the world out of all the 21. So I think that says a lot that Tokyo gave it some competition. My only negative feedback for the race was how far a lot of the toilets, the portaloos, were on the course. Thankfully, I didn't desperately need to go at any point, but most of the portaloos were a considerable distance in comparison to other marathons. So if you're running along and you think you might need to go and you see one close by, try and use it. But yeah, again, just don't panic about this, especially if you're a slow runner. Know the cut-off times in advance, stick to your plan, and just give yourself an extra 10 or so minutes for 1 or 2 toilet stops, and you'll be fine. The finish line was also a bit of a trek, not New York Marathon long, but you will definitely feel it on tired legs. You cross the finish line, you walk a whole big stretch, you then turn to the other side of the road, you then go completely back on yourself, just up to where you finished, and then you turn right, and then you have to do another big walk again to get out. Thankfully, though, sometimes you can't do much about these logistics based on where it is, but thankfully the volunteers are super helpful, and again, and then they're quickly handing out your medal, giving you some finisher hydration and stacks. So they are trying to make it as quickly as possible for you. I also I bumped into some more podcast listeners on the way out as well. So thank you for being delightful company. And I'm glad we could distract each other during that long walk to the exit. I would advise to make a solid plan of where you're meeting your loved ones after the race. That's pretty standard for most marathons because it can be pretty chaotic. But especially in Tokyo with that many runners, you've got big high-rise buildings that can really affect the signal. And when you're tired and you want to just get off your feet, it's frustrating if you're not able to communicate with them. So have a plan ahead, I would say. Thankfully, I'd agreed to meet my mum at Tokyo Station near the finish line, so I knew exactly where I was going. However, this was still another long walk because the marathon's still going on. There's very few places you can cross above ground. So you most likely need to go underground to get across to the other side. And again, this will require quite a bit of walking. So basically have a pre-planned meeting spot that works for you and just make sure you communicate that properly in advance. I was going to be traveling for Medal Monday, so I decided to go straight from the marathon with my mum to get some Medal Sunday pics done instead. So we went to Shibuya Crossing after the race to take some photos at night. Unfortunately, the Starbucks that Yimi suggested to take photos from in episode 138 of the MEG Method has now closed, but there are a few other places in the area that you could get a higher vantage point. And as I was looking for a new photo spot, I met two incredible 6-star finishes, and they were also, it turns out, MEG Method podcast listeners from Seattle on the crossing. The delightful Erin and Rachel. It's actually quite funny. I was stood at the crossing. I was trying to work out where Starbucks is closed. I was like, oh no, a lot of people are going to be looking for that. Where could I get a photo? And as I'm looking, I'm standing there with my mum. These two ladies are like, no, I'm telling you, I listened to this podcast and they were saying that there was a Starbucks here, but I think that was it. I think it was closed. And then Erin turned to me and she said, do you know where the Starbucks is? So I had to say, I was like, oh, actually, I mentioned that on and before I'd even finished, she was like, wait, are you Meg? And then they just got very excited. So Erin and Rachel, the Run Edmonds crew, you were just absolute balls of energy, even after 26.2 miles. So I very much admire you. And I really loved learning to know them. So thank you for stopping me. That was a lot of fun. I'm glad we could chat and get a photo. And yeah, you ladies are awesome. I loved your enthusiasm. And I hope you managed to get your photo after we agreed that Starbucks was definitely closed. And it was pretty hilarious seeing my mum's reaction to people stopping me on this trip. She had no idea what was going on because people were coming up to me in tourist attractions, public toilets, restaurants, hotel lobbies, crossings. She knew I had my own podcast, but I don't think she had any clue how out of hand it had gotten and was looking at me as if aliens had taken over. And I was no more help because this was a complete novelty to me. I had no idea it had gotten so out of hand either. So I was like, don't look at me, Sue. This is just as wild. So really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for every single person that said hi, asked for a photo, shared their story with me during this trip of how coaching has helped me. Because like I said, that's the whole point. I couldn't care less about me. It's not about me. I do the podcast for you, and I put this podcast out you kind of put the podcast out into a void, right, into the world, and you hope it's helpful. So to hear firsthand that it has been helpful to you and how it's helped you move, think, and feel better, it really lets me know I'm on the right path. So thank you. meeting you all really was like the highlight of my trip. It doesn't get better than that. So thanks to everyone. And as I say, Erin and Rachel, the Run Edmonds crew, you are a lot of fun. You were the hype party. I need to run a marathon with you two. I feel like I would. You would be like rocket fuel on the way round just by your personality. But after that heartwarming experience with the Seattle Queens at Shibuya Crossing, we headed back to the hotel. I had a quick trip to the Hotel Onsen, which was a delight. And my savior after running 26.2 miles. And then I met with my fellow Young Lives versus Cancer buddy, Russ, and we met up with some of his friends and got ramen before all succumbing to the need to sleep. The next day, Mum and I were up nice and early to head to Tokyo Station to get the Shinkansen to Osaka. And thanks to the epic Shinkansen, we were there in a few speedy hours. We stayed at the Rise Osaka Namba Hotel, which we were really impressed with. Our hotel room was great, very spacious, and the hotel smelt amazing wherever we went in it. So I don't know if they like spray perfume in the vents or something, but the smell was delightful. It was a short, about 10-minute walk, I'd say, to the Dotonbori district, which was amazingly convenient, as that's the main area in Osaka. And we were only in Osaka for 4 days in total, but we really packed a lot in. On the first day, we explored the Dotonbori district and we did a nighttime boat ride down the river with a very enthusiastic tour guide named Tommy, who only knew the English words hello, goodbye, low bridge, and Spider-Man. So that was a lot of fun. I got a yummy Japanese treat, which was like a cheese coin. And it was a bit like a sweet cheese-filled pancake. Don't know what it was called, but it was great. And that seemed to be a very popular thing to eat in Japan. My mum got a freshly grilled steak kebab and some vegetables at the side of the river. She really enjoyed that. And as she was eating, we watched a person dressed as a wolf in a cape dancing around with his real life cat. So, and again, not the weirdest thing I saw in Japan, but I absolutely loved it. Another one of my favorite videos. And at that point, you just kind of go with it. On the side of the river is a massive Ferris wheel attached to the Donka Hearty store, and no one was more shocked than me than when my mum said, "Do you want to go on it?" Which I absolutely did. I love that sort of thing, but I was very surprised that my mum was keen, as that's not usually her thing. So we paid and queued, we got on, and then very quickly my mum realised that yes, that absolutely wasn't her thing. I don't think she realised quite how high up it was. So that was very entertaining for me, that ride up the Ferris wheel. I had to do a lot of, my coaching really came in to help there, to get my mum feeling calm at those heights. But I loved it. That was one of my favorite things we did in Osaka. And once we were back safely on the ground, I think my mum was actually very glad and proud that she did it as well. It certainly wasn't her favorite thing, but I don't think she regretted doing it. So fully recommend that. The next day was the rainiest day of the trip, but we actually welcomed that. We had a nice excuse to have a lazy morning in our hotel room, as we really hadn't stopped. We'd packed so much into the days whilst we were in Japan so far. So we had coffee in our beds and we watched some interesting Japanese TV. It's definitely worth giving it a watch for half an hour, even if just for the adverts. I don't think I've ever seen hand cream sold so enthusiastically, but it worked. I've never wanted hand cream more. We then went out and visited the Osaka castle. It was only a small fee to get in. There was a nice little view from the top. You could see like the moat area around the castle and a little overlook of the grounds around it. And then in the castle, there was lots of floors. It was like a museum with lots of different history as well. So we're actually really glad we went in there. We then walked around in the light rain through the surrounding garden area of the castle before heading back to the Dotonbori district again. We then window shopped outside some of the interesting shops there. And it was actually so interesting to observe how much the Japanese still physically shop. We saw absolutely no big delivery vans during our trip. I don't think I saw one during the trip, like maybe some like food trucks, like food vans, but nothing for like online deliveries. And it just didn't seem like a big thing at all. Like every shop we went to was just absolutely packed. And so many of the stores that you would think would only appeal to tourists and not to locals were actually full of locals as well. So that was a real surprise. It was really nice to see how much support their physical stores have. I didn't realize how much I'd missed seeing it. I'm not a big shopper myself back home, but it's really sad to see a lot of our stores closing. So it was so nice to see that the Japanese really support that. We then lined up for dinner to get some Osakan okonomiyaki, which is a Japanese savory pancake dish consisting of wheat flour batter and other ingredients like meat and vegetables. And they cook that in front of you on this hot plate. So it's a really fun and amazing experience to watch. I'm a vegetarian and my mum isn't. So everywhere we went and that I've suggested caters for both. This evening we went to a place called Mizuno, which was incredible. And we clearly weren't the only ones that thought that, because every time we went past it, it had a big queue. You can't pre-book for it. But I'd say anywhere that is popular like that, I would recommend for dinner time going closer to 5 p.m. Because you're more likely to get seated quicker. The next day we took the normal train to Nara. We spent the first half of the day there walking around Nara Deer Park and some of the gardens. It took us a while to find the subways the first day. In that station, they were actually underneath, I think. But again, just follow those signs. But yeah, we went there for the first half of the day to the Nara Deer Park and some of the gardens. It was also very easily walkable, and there was lots of little shrines to see. There are literally hundreds of deer in Nara to see. So you just need to walk around and you'll see, you won't have to look far to find them. Mostly they're very polite. Like if you bow to them, they will bow back, which is an interesting experience. However, I will say the politeness ends when it comes to food. They do not mess around. I imagine with thousands of people feeding them throughout the day, their tummy has no concept of time, and they're savages when it comes to food. I literally had one chomp a hole through my iPhone charger that was poking just a tiny bit out of my pocket. So make sure you don't have any valuables loose, and do not feed them anything but the special deer crackers that you can buy from around the park. We thought we'd spend the whole day there. It was meant to be a day trip, but we actually covered everything we wanted to see a lot quicker than we thought. And we really didn't rush it again. We took our time. But then we actually decided to travel back in the early afternoon and headed back to the Dotonbori district. We went to another well-recommended restaurant that evening called Gyoza Dotonbori. We got there just as it opened at 5 p.m. and we didn't have to queue at all. So as I say, around the 5 p.m. mark seems to be the sweet spot. At this place, I had veggie gyozas as a starter and then some ramen. The food was great, friendly staff, and yeah, the gyozas especially very yummy. On our last full day in Osaka, we actually took a day trip to Hiroshima and Miyajima. Some people spend 2 days to do this, but we actually did everything we wanted in one and didn't feel rushed. Thankfully, this was the best day for the weather during our Osaka leg of the trip. We took the Shinkansen in the morning to Hiroshima. We then took the local train when we got there to the ferry station. At the ferry station, there was 2 ferries available. We bought tickets for the ferry on the far right. I think it was the JR ferry, but it's whichever one's on the right. And that was important because that one travels right next to the Itsukashima Shrine, which is otherwise known as the Floating Gate. It's one of the main things to see near Miyajima Island. So we had amazing views for that from the ferry on the way past. We then spent a leisurely morning walking around the island. When we were there was more deer there, ones that you would have seen at Nara. There were little shrines that you could pay to do there as well. They're all quite reasonable. I think it works out about £2.50 to go in some of those places. We also thankfully got to experience low tide when we were there, which is great because it means you can actually walk right up to the floating gate, which was a wonderful experience. My mum and I got some nice photos together. Unfortunately, we didn't get to ride the cable cars on the island. They're closed at certain periods of the year to do maintenance. However, I think we were just a day too early. So you might, if you're more at the mid-March end, I think it opens again. So you might be lucky during your trip. So just have a look. It was a beautiful sunny day, like I said. So we had some ice cream in the sun, although this wasn't as peaceful an experience as we'd hoped because we did get chased around different spots by deer trying to eat it. I was having to eat my ice cream facing my mum to be lookout to make sure that this deer wasn't going to go bite her ice cream over her shoulder. So yeah, just be careful with those pesky deers over the food. They lure you into a false sense of security by politely bowing with you. But yeah, all bets are off when it comes to food. We then got a little tour boat from the island that docked right next to the Peace Memorial in Hiroshima. It was nice to experience. We're glad we did it that way. We're glad we did the ferry on the way and we got to see the floating gate. And then on the way back, taking the ferry, it was nice to do, taking the little tour boat. It gave us a little presentation on board that told us a lot about the area, which was really interesting. And it was useful to dock right at the memorial area because that's the main part you want to do in Hiroshima. Walking around Hiroshima was of course very sad, seeing the devastation it caused. But I believe it's so important to learn about the history, learning about our part in it, Japan's part in it, also the history of others around the world. I think we need to learn about our history so we can learn from our mistakes and hopefully better connect and build a better future. So it was a solemn visit, of course, but a very important one. We walked around the area and saw the atomic bomb dome, the memorial park, the Flame of Peace, the cranes, the clock, and then we visited the Peace Museum to learn more about the history. It was then late afternoon, early evening when we finished. So we walked into the main food shopping area and got Hiroshin okonomiyaki. Now, this is different to the Osaka one because they add noodles to it. And this was my favorite. I absolutely loved it. We went to an incredible place called Okonomimura, or otherwise known as the Okonomi Village. It's located in the downtown area of Hiroshima City, and it's a place where locals and tourists basically drop by for casual dining. There are 24 different counter-style okonomiyaki restaurants scattered from the second to the fourth floor in this building. It's like an okonomiyaki theme park. The world is your oyster, or rather the pancake. The world is your pancake, rather. And they all have their own little sweet quirks and offerings. So I would just say to go wander along the floors like we did, see what one takes your fancy. They're all like open plan kitchens with a bar table running around along it. So you can just sit on the stools and watch them cook. It's a really special experience. We found a place on the second floor that we fell in love with. It was run by a Japanese woman and her mother, and they really were just such a joy to watch in the kitchen. They worked so quietly and efficiently together. It would absolutely not look like that if me and my parents tried to share a kitchen. So you couldn't help but be in awe of them and their work, and the food tasted fantastic. We booked our Shinkansen for 9 p.m. as we were concerned we wouldn't be able to do it all in time because we'd crammed it all into a day. But actually, in reality, we probably could have booked it an hour or two earlier. However, I would say if the cable car was open, then actually 9 p.m. probably would have been a good bet. The next day, we were up early to get the train to Kyoto. We actually got the normal train system, as Kyoto really isn't that far away from Osaka. I think it's around 30 minutes on the Shinkansen, about an hour by train. So we just decided to save ourselves a chunk of money by getting the normal train, and then also not having to be stuck to a time to get to the Shinkansen. And it was very straightforward and easy, so we would happily do that again. My mum absolutely loved Kyoto. This was her favorite place on the trip by far. I loved it as well, but I think I loved all of the cities the same, but for different reasons. They all had their own little quirks. I think maybe Tokyo just a bit more than the others, just because the special connections and bonds I had with people there. So that's probably why I had the soft spot, but all the cities we went to were wonderful. I'd happily go back. I think my mum would go back to Kyoto for longer if she went again. And we stayed at Gion the Second in Kyoto, which was another very spacious, lovely hotel room, quite traditionally decorated. And it was an incredible location. It was nice and quiet, but it was right around the corner from all the hustle and bustle. Gion is Kyoto's geisha district. So you can spot hostesses in their colourful kimonos, and we're right around the corner from a shrine that lots of people were visiting to, and then we're just a few minutes stroll from the bustling Hana Mikoji Street, and that's like the everyday backdrop you see in a lot of Kyoto pictures that people take. It's like that. It's like an iconic streak, basically, in Gion in Kyoto. So we're very lucky to be just around the corner. On the first day there, we explored all of Gion and enjoyed going into all of the lovely boutique stores. And we loved seeing the women and the men walking around in traditional kimonos. Some of them are locals, some of them are tourists. It was fun seeing the tourists getting involved. There was lots of photo shoots going on. It's definitely worth having a proper plan for Kyoto of what temples you really want to see, as it really is temple galore. There's about, I think, over 1,600 temples and 400 shrines. So you could literally spend a month there and probably not see them all. So just have a plan of what are the main ones you want to see. On our first full day, we took the bus to the Golden Pavilion, Kinkakuji. And once again, we got very lucky with the weather. I think we had every single weather imaginable on the bus there. As we got off the bus, it was lightly snowing, which caused us to giggle, and then lightly raining. However, when we got to the Golden Pavilion, the clouds seemed to part and the sun shone. So from our photos, you would have thought it was a beautiful sunny day. We then hopped back on the bus after exploring that area, and we went to the Silver Pavilion, which is Ginkakuji Temple. And once again, while on the warm bus, we escaped all of the heavy hail outside, and then we got off to some lovely sunshine. So from our photos, you'd know no different. I actually preferred the Silver Temple, as the garden around it looked exactly like those miniature Zen garden kits that I used to play with as a kid. Like, you know, the little fake garden that had the sand and the little rake to draw patterns with. I think it was sort of meant to be like a meditative experience. This was like a real life massive version of that. And it was very meditative walking around. We then walked from there straight onto the Philosopher's Path. This is a fairly flat 2 km long path that stretches alongside a canal in Kyoto's Hiroshima district. The path gained its name thanks to the influential Meiji area philosopher Kitaro Nishida. And he walked this path on his way to work at prestigious Kyoto University. Nishida founded the Kyoto School of Philosophy, and this was his daily walk as part of his meditative practices. So that's why it's called the Philosopher's Path. During the Sakura, the season of the cherry blossom in April, the path could be expected to be packed because people want to go and see the beautiful trees blossoming over the path. However, we were really lucky. I think because of the weird weather that day, we basically ended up having the path to ourselves, which was a real treat. We stopped at a really cute family-run cafe where I had the best matcha latte of my life. Like, I'm still dreaming about it now. It was a really quirky cafe filled with lots of trinkets and mosaic lamps. The family who ran it were dressed up in like full-on suits and like a beautiful, almost like ball gown in the middle of the day. So we felt very special for this occasion. They looked really smart. And the cafe, as I say, just had so much character to it. The most interesting part of the cafe was the toilet. Once again, though, there was some lovely art in it. And then the toilet tank of the toilet, so the top of the toilet had gravel on it. I don't know whether that was meant to be part of the art or what the decorative choice was there, but it tickled me very much. So keep a lookout for that cafe if you walk the path. It's early on during the walk. We then finished the walk with a few more shrines, and then we headed back on the train to Gion, had a little rest, and then walked into the main shopping district in Kyoto to get some food. I would say a lot of the restaurants in Gion are quite high-end and pricey. And weirdly, for it being a Buddhist area, I really struggled to find some strong vegetarian options. So we actually walked to the main shopping area and went to a highly recommended restaurant called Gyoza Chow Chow. This was the longest queue we experienced during our time in Japan. You couldn't pre-book it, but it was absolutely worth the wait. We loved it. The staff were lively and fun. Their food was reasonably priced. I think we had 3 dishes for about £10 to £12 total each. And the food, like I said, was really yummy. As you could expect, the gyozas were the best things on the menu. But they did have some lovely other sides as well. And in fact, it was so good that we went back there again the next night, but we went at around 5 p.m. again that time and got straight in. So 5 p.m. just seemed to be a great time for dinner if you want to get places into places quick and they don't allow you to reserve. On our final full day in Kyoto, which was actually Mother's Day back in England, we got the train early to Fushimi Inari Taisha, otherwise known as the Thousands Gates, and they do not lie. It's literally a path of about 1,000 orange to red gates. Now, this was quite a significant workout. A lot of people only go halfway and then decide to go back down. But if my 62-year-old mother can do it like a champ, then I'm confident that you all can too. And so it's worth persevering. There was a guy there as well being pushed in a wheelchair by his mates. I don't think he ended up being able to go to some of the steep parts, but it was possible for him to go to some of the areas with his friend's help. And you really do get rewarded in these places by persevering, because the further you go, the crowds lessen and there's some fantastic opportunities to get photos. So it stays as like a winding incline. At the start, it's really hard to get photos because there's a lot of people, but the further up you go, it gets more peaceful, easier to take photos. We saw some amazing views along the way. It's amazing to see as well the odd little stores and cafes that locals have set up on these big steep hillsides. My mum and I tried to support the locals. We stopped for a lovely green tea and some fine china mugs sold by a lovely local gentleman. And then we bought some beautiful handmade postcards from a wonderful female artist. So persevere if you can and try and give it all a go. It's worth it. We took a different route back down to the bottom, which we're really glad we did because we came across a really sweet riverside cafe. I got to have a Mother's Day lunch with my mum, which was lovely. And what we didn't realize, you could go through the cafe and we discovered like a secret back patio area that was overlooking this beautiful little lake. So that was a lovely backdrop, and we were watching a heron tanning itself on the side. My mum had an amazing cauliflower soup. I had a yummy tofu banh mi sandwich. And then we had to laugh because there was a sticky toffee pudding on the menu. This is my favorite dessert in the world, but it was the most expensive thing on the menu. But my mum likes the sticky toffee as well. So we both looked at each other and we were like, shall we do it? And we're like, absolutely. But oh my goodness, when it arrived, I think it would be generous to say it was the size of a mouthful. I think we both had a lick each and it was gone. So yeah, lesson learned that at least at this place, the sticky toffee pudding in Japan is not equal to an English sticky toffee pudding. So we should probably stick to English sticky toffee pudding in England, but it did cause lots of laughs. And the rest of the food there was amazing. We then traveled to the Arashiyama bamboo forest. We were both glad we went. It was nice to see another area of Kyoto. There was a cool lake there that you could do some boating, but we both agreed that was probably a one and done experience for us. We didn't feel the need to go back there. So I'd say go if you haven't been before, as it's one of the main tourist spots and it's impressive to see all the bamboo. But be aware that's a very crowded area, not the most zen experience. However, a big highlight for me was when I popped into a cute little local owned art store there, and I wrote on my translation app to say to the store owner how beautiful I thought her art was. And she got all excited. She told me to wait a moment, and she came back and she gifted me a beautiful paper crane that she had made. And I think that was my favorite item I brought back from the whole trip. And it sits proudly on my dresser. So I'm glad we went. That was a really lovely moment. For our final evening, we went back to our gyoza place from the first night, and then I dropped Mum back off at the hotel, as I think she was walked out for the day. She absolutely smashed it, especially all the way up that Thousand Gate area. So I went back out, but on the way down, I bumped into some more podcast listeners from the USA this time in the hotel lobby, which absolutely blew my mind to be in Kyoto and still meeting some friendly faces. So I chatted to them for a while, and then I sprinted back to the shopping district to go to the Kyoto Nintendo store before it closed, because at the top of the store in the Kyoto one, they've got like a cool like little Mario world set up. So it was fun to take some medal pictures there. Every morning in Kyoto, we got up early to stroll around the streets of Gion before the crowds get there. So it's quite magical to see it in the peace and quiet, and it was a good opportunity to take some photos with nobody there. However, I would say that even that early in the morning, there were still quite a few people there having professional photo shoots done so they could do it without the crowd. So you really have to be committed to the photo there. And even then, there were still quite a few people about. We had one last walk around on the final morning. I'd bought a beautiful little Japanese vase for my mum earlier in the week for Mother's Day. And then she'd managed to find its twin. So that sits proudly around the house at home. So those are lovely little keepsakes. And my mum kindly, for running the marathon, she treated me to a little Studio Ghibli beautiful bowl that I've got as a keepsake there as well. So those are the only few things that we bought for ourselves. Just some nice, beautiful little keepsakes of the trip that will last us a long time. But we did find some lovely little fun and cute gifts for friends and family. We then got the Shinkansen back to Tokyo. We actually decided to stay in Haneda on the final night to be close to the airport. As we were flying early the next morning, we stayed at the Mercure Hotel, which was definitely the fanciest hotel we stayed in. The decor was incredible. The rooms and the beds were huge, and it had because we were ways out, we had a really lovely view of the city. And I think because it was further out from the city, we got it for a very reasonable price. And also for a little extra, we got this incredible breakfast buffet the next day as well. So I think we would definitely do that again on our last night if we went back. I think it only took us around 40 minutes into central Tokyo. The hotel let us check in early as well, which was a big bonus. So we could literally dump our stuff in our rooms, and then we went out to spend the rest of the day in Tokyo before coming back late in the evening. My mum and I, we split up on our last evening. She wanted to go back to the Sensoji area because she loved it so much, and again felt very safe on her own at night around there. I wanted to go back for a quick stroll around Yoyogi Park before it got dark, and then finish at the Shibuya crossing to get some last minute presents for the family. Dinner was very uninspiring. but fun. It was a culmination of Japanese snacks that I'd yet to try. So I went to 7-Eleven across the road from the hotel. I bought some veggie sushi, as I hadn't actually managed to find any so far on the trip. So please do send some suggestions my way if you've had any good veggie sushi places. I got some onigiri, which is a rice ball snack, and then some Japanese chocolate called galbo. You could get it in different flavors, but I got the strawberry one and it was delicious. So much so that I bought a couple of packs and I brought it back to the UK and very reluctantly shared with my brothers. But yeah, so an uninspiring last meal, but I actually loved it. It was really fun having a little picnic in my room and getting to try some more Japanese snacks. The hotel very kindly offered a free shuttle to the airport the next day. So that was another big plus at the Mercure. One thing that shocked us was how long the security line was at the airport that morning. So please do make sure you arrive with plenty of time at the airport, because it was honestly the longest airport line I'd ever seen. It literally ran the entire length of the arrivals terminal. Thankfully, because the Japanese are so efficient, I know I've used that word again, but they are, the queues still moved fairly quickly. But yeah, definitely give yourself plenty of time. The girl next to me was sweating, and as she left, barely any time to get through. I don't know if she got there in time, but yeah, give yourself plenty of time at arrivals at departures, to make sure that you've got lots of time to leave and get your gate on time. We thankfully got to our gate with plenty of time. We watched a bit of sumo wrestling on a special sumo TV outside our gate. So another Japanese experience ticked off while waiting to board the plane. I accidentally walked into the men's toilet by mistake. So that was a lovely unexpected thrill before leaving. And then we very reluctantly boarded our flight home, and we're missing Japan even more when we left. So that is it, my friends. That is the Japan experience. It was an absolute wonderful one. I know today was a long episode, so thank you if you're still with me right at the end. But I had lots of requests to do this episode and to give as much detail as possible for people that want to go in the future. So hopefully there's lots of tips in there as well to make your experience better, and some things you can action and take away. I felt really lucky. We really did do everything we wanted to do. I'd say the one thing that I felt disappointed that I didn't get to do was the real life Mario Karts in Tokyo. We saw them all over the place in Tokyo. It's so much fun. I was aware of this going out, but I didn't read up on it properly. I read that you needed a international driving license before you went. I thought, great, I'm an international, I have a driving license. But you actually need to buy a special international driving license to go out there. I think the frustrating thing was, I think it's actually very easy and quite cheap. I think someone said they'd gone to the post office to get one, and maybe it cost them around, let's say around £5 or £10, so not very much at all. And then that meant they could then book and do the Mario Kart there. But it's actually a legal requirement to have this special driving license to be able to drive those karts in Japan. So they literally will not let you do it without it. So hopefully anyone planning to go, that can be a big tip for you. Make sure you get that, look up the Mario Kart, what you need for it, but it should be that little international driving license and then your ID when you get there, and you won't be disappointed like I was. But other than, and to say, that's something for me to look forward to in the future. I definitely plan to go back to Japan in the future. And that was literally the only thing that I felt like I missed out on. And if you are thinking about running the Tokyo Marathon, do it. You will have the best experience. If you're thinking of supporting someone running the Tokyo Marathon, do it. You will have the best experience. I think my 62-year-old mother had more fun than me. She's already planning to go back on a solo trip. She loved it so much and felt really safe and welcome there. If you are planning to visit Japan in the future, then just absolutely do it. It's become one of my favorite countries I've ever visited. I was so charmed by the people and many parts of the culture and traditions. If you have any further questions, then please feel free to contact me. My details are in the show notes below. I'm happy to try and answer as best I can. And I'll put the links of some of the things I mentioned on this episode as well. A reminder, do go check out episode 138 if you want to run the Tokyo Marathon one day, as that really goes into detail of the marathon. And then without a doubt, the people were my favorite part of the whole Japan trip, from meeting the kind and welcoming locals to the inspiring runners I met and learning more about their stories. I just feel so incredibly lucky and grateful. And I'm so proud of the community we are all creating through this podcast. So thank you again for anyone who stopped me to say hi and get a cuddle in person. It absolutely made my trip, and I'm so happy to learn to know you. And I'd love to know any of your thoughts and shares from around this episode. Are you going in the future and feeling excited about it? Did you go recently? Did you run the marathon? How was your experience? Please do let me know. My details are below. And like I said, send any cues my way and I'll be happy to connect. But for now, be kind, be curious, be well, live the adventure, and big love. And I'll speak to you soon.